Okay, so I'm Michelle Laro. I'm one of the regional coordinators for the Eastern Washington, Northern Idaho region. And we're really excited to have everyone here. And I want to give a shout out to Laurel because I think she invited half of the people who ended up signing up. So thanks for inviting so many people, Laurel. Yeah, we're just really excited. So we didn't have any specific plans about what the discussion would look like. We had this meeting in person 2 weeks ago, and the people who went had a lot of fun discussing about the proposals. I did have some questions on the website, on our blog, and I'm gonna try to put them in the chat and see if I can get the, sometimes I try to put too much in. I think I got all of it. So these questions are not at all like the only thing that we can talk about, but it's just, so one of the, I think the fun things about Jane Austen with the proposals is in some ways the bad proposals are more fun than the actual romantic proposals. So we're, so there's a lot to discuss, and it's kind of funny that the, you know, the romantic proposals, actually, we don't get that much detail there. So, yeah, I just like to open it up to the floor and ask people if anybody wants to start, any thoughts, any comments. And you could also just say what your favorite proposal scene is too.
I printed out the questions from what you sent out. This is Lynn from California. Hey, Michelle, it's great to actually see you in person. This is fun. Is that the questions you're going off of?
Yeah, so they should be in the chat also if people, yeah.
I'd like to say that I really love the letter kind of proposal in Persuasion. That's one of my very, very favorites. I just love that. And the one I like best that's oral that isn't funny is the one in Emma.
Yes. The Emma one is my favorite.
My favorite is Mr. Darcy's first proposal to Lizzie Bennet.
Yeah, that one's fun.
Having just watched Emma and Persuasion yesterday and today, I have to say that that Jane Austen seemed to have almost reused the same motif between William Eliot's proposal during the concert to Anne Eliot, and then the one from Mr. Eliot in Emma. They both come on like gangbusters, just saying, now that we have a moment alone, I have to tell you, I love you, and I'm sure you love me back. You know, they both just sort of jumped in without a real plan. And it was striking to me how similar both of those proposals were.
Do you mean Mr. Elton's proposal?
Sorry, Elton, yes, Mr. Elton, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Elton and Mr. Eliot. They both approached it in a very slipshod manner. Thank you very much. As if their feelings were the only thing that mattered. You know, they didn't give a thought for whether or not there was a reciprocation.
Well, I think the proposals where the person is totally taken by shock, which would be Lizzie's first proposal by Mr. Darcy, and then the Mr. Elton one, they were not expecting that at all. I mean, that was really, that was a broadside proposal. And I guess maybe Catherine in Northanger Abbey, because she's so naive, she doesn't realize she's being proposed to.
Oh, with John Thorpe, you mean? With John Thorpe kind of pseudo proposed, kind of?
Yes, very much. And then people are saying, oh, congratulations. And she's, what? Poor thing.
Well, it's funny because she seems so unaware that he is at all even hinting at a proposal.
Exactly.
And yeah, so I read one person, I think it was the editor of the Harvard edition, who said that she thought that Catherine was actually aware that he was making a proposal. And I think it's very much clear that she's not at all aware that he's proposing to her. And she's just responding to like the literal speech, the literal language. She's being very concrete and literal. And he's thinking he is making all these implications that she has like no clue what he's talking about.
Well, in a proposal, would the gentleman have had to go to the dad first and say, I want to marry your daughter? Or are they of an age where, or, you know, a situation where they can just go directly to each other? Nobody really asks the parents, except after the fact.
Yeah, I think the, you know, Colin's going to Lizzie's mother first is actually his first mistake. That
Very
I
true.
think at that time, it was the tradition that, yeah, that the parents had to give their permission, but the couple would sort of decide separately beforehand.
Well, Collins is also scoping because he's, you know, wanting Jane, and then, oh, I can't get her. Well, who else is left? My goodness. Let me change I was going to do a proposal. Let me cross out this name and put Kitty now.
And when Mr. Collins proposed to Lizzie, he had every confidence that she was going to accept, as well as Mr. Darcy. So that's a parallel between the two proposals. There was no doubt in either one's mind that Lizzie was going to accept.
Yeah.
Well, also with those, Collins cited Lady Catherine as why he wanted to get married. And Darcy cites, he doesn't say Lady Catherine, basically his family, why he shouldn't ought to marry her. And so it's just interesting that they came from this, talking about the same person, basically Lady Catherine and society. One says, yes, you got to marry her. And the other one's like, no, you shouldn't marry her. And he does it anyway. So just fun.
So going back to what was said earlier, sorry, hi, kia ora, I'm Frances, I'm from New Zealand. We had a speaker last year who was talking about the sort of the format of proposals. And I think that one of the problems with John Thorpe is he didn't, and a lot of Austen's people never actually say, will you marry me? They talk around the subject, and it's up to the person they're proposing to figure out what they're saying. And he was saying that a declaration of love is tantamount to a proposal. If somebody says I love you, that means that they are proposing to you. What are people's thoughts on that? And what is the appropriate thing to say when proposing?
Yeah, and I
That's
think
interesting. Yeah, no, that's interesting to think about, because does anyone ever really say, will you marry me? Or even I love you? That was one of the questions I'm thinking, when did that ever happen in Jane Austen, where they actually said, I love you? So yeah, you're right. It's implied. And some people got it, and some people didn't.
Well, the proper response to that, according to Lizzie Bennet, is no.
And like he does say, I admire and love you. So he does say that. You're right, but he doesn't. Does he say marriage? Does he say marry me? On the first one.
Yeah, he says consent. Will you consent to be my wife?
Yeah, so he does ask.
So that's pretty clear, whereas a lot of the other ones aren't. And when you were talking about, sorry, I'm not sure who it was talking about Catherine Morland earlier, it made me think about what if she was on the autism spectrum? She would not have got that. People who are neurodivergent tend to understand the words that are said and don't understand that aren't looking for other meanings, that you are saying what you mean. And a lot of the proposals seem to have multiple layers in them. It's not just will you marry me? It's, I have this great affection for you or whatever, but they don't straight out say the things.
This discussion is reminding me of the movie North and South when, and I don't remember the name of the character, the guy who, oh dear, I can't remember anybody's name. The guy who likes the girl, and at the beginning of the movie, you know, he's talking to her about weddings and
Henry.
how
The
would
older
you
one who likes,
how would you like it? And, you know, would you like your wedding that way? And he's considering this as encouragement from her that she's interested in marrying him, and she doesn't get it, you know. And it turns out, well, if you were a more metropolitan miss, you would have understood that I was talking about marriage and not be surprised now later when he actually asks her. So yeah, you had to be careful what you said because you were implying things that you didn't know you were implying.
That's reminiscent of Mr. Darcy's conversation with Elizabeth, where he's talking about how a woman could be married and too close to her family. And Elizabeth is confused as to why he's even going there.
Yeah.
Really not on the same wavelength at the time.
Yeah.
but then maybe the lack of clarity explains why Wentworth doesn't realize that people are considering him engaged to Louisa because of his attitude towards her. So he doesn't realize he's sort of kind of proposed in a way, at least the family saw it as he showed his interest, which means in that day and age, it's not like you dated for 2 years or something like that. Just didn't do that. So
Yeah, he
maybe
committed
that-
himself. He committed himself by his actions more than by his words.
Right, without the ask. So,
That I think connects with Willoughby also, where at least Wentworth, when he realized he had sort of acted dishonorably, knew that he had to, you know, if she wanted to be engaged to him, he knew he had to do that. Whereas Willoughby acted like he loved Marianne and implied that he loved Marianne, but never said it and just acted very dishonorably.
Well, also too, I'm a Willoughby fan. Sorry, everyone, but I really like Willoughby. I have to stick up for him. Jennifer's laughing.
Stick up
when
for
they
Willoughby, but you're wrong, but go ahead.
When they press Willoughby later, when they're talking to Marianne, did he actually do this? And she's like, well, no. And so I think on the woman's end, I mean, she's dying. She loves this guy so much that he is not, in her mind, she's already married. She's already engaged. And he's like, where's the money? You know, he's on to the next. And so the woman, it's so hard because the guy is the one that has to ask. I mean, does anybody in Austen's novels, do any of the girls ever ask the guy, let's get married? I mean, it doesn't happen.
I mean, the
Right.
closest we have is Emma saying to Knightley, when he's like, who are you going to dance with? She says, if you ask me, I'll dance with you.
Oh, okay. Hey,
That's the closest you can do. If you
That's
ask me.
forward girl. Yeah, you're right.
I don't quite understand what's missing from Wentworth's letter. Besides the proposal, he doesn't really, I guess, propose to her in the letter. But supposedly, I guess, Michelle, you've says there are hints from Austen that things are missing from Wentworth's letter. What?
Well, so I think that they should not have gotten married when they were younger, and that he really had to grow up mentally in order to be worthy of her. And so, yeah, so I guess for the letter part, I'm just wondering, like, he says more later on about, you know, how mistaken he was. And so I was just kind of wondering, you know, does that have to go into the letter, or can we take sort of the letter and then his later admission of all his mistakes and put them together and sort of see that he has he changed enough?
Well, they often, I mean, that's reminding me of the same thing with Pride and Prejudice after the second proposal. After Darcy's asked and Lizzie's accepted him, and then they go on this long walk and they have this long conversation where all these things from the past are explained and overcome. And so similar with Persuasion, the letter is the engagement, and then after that they talk out all their past misunderstandings and all that squared away.
That's a good
I
point.
noticed
Because
about
they're
more
not going
than-
to have romantic scenes ahead of time. It's going to be the proposal, and then later, oh, this is when I really fell in love with you. So that usually comes, like you're saying, that conversation afterwards. There's too much tension prior, I think.
Right, you gotta get the question out, and then you discuss once everybody's, yes, of course. And then, and then you can just, so when did you fall in love with me and all that kind of stuff. I think that's not abnormal. I
Mhm.
mean, in real life, so.
It's kind of like asking for the consent to be in love with them in a way, like, will you marry me? Cool. Well, now I can tell you that I love you and how great you are and how long I've been in love with you. But up until that point, it's just really awkward.
Mm.
It wouldn't
That's
be
what I
quite the
noticed.
same. It wouldn't be quite the same if he says, will you marry me? And she says, well, first explain this to me. Why did you behave like that? And then if you're gonna, explain item 1, 2, and 3 to me, then maybe I'll say yes.
Although that is something that modern women should do.
That's a lot more practical, but yeah, not as romantic.
How come you didn't just back in so you're out of the way while you're at it?
Yeah.
Well, and to be fair for Mr. Wentworth, and he is my favorite, since they were already engaged, it seems like he was just cutting to the chase of, okay, I was an idiot. I think you still love me. Do you still love me? So I think he didn't need to explain very much in the letter
Oh, yeah.
because they'd already previously. It's a different
Oh, okay.
relationship. So
With a
we're just
little
sort
bit
of
less
fast forwarding. And if you still love me, then find me, and then we can have sort of the more of a chat. But since they'd already been engaged once,
Yeah.
I've given him a little benefit of the doubt there.
I
I
think
noticed
the most-
more than,
oh.
I'm just gonna say, besides those 2 novels, almost all of them have some kind of, after the proposal or around it, they have some kind of an explanation about how they felt and what was going on. I mean, in Sense and Sensibility, Edward tells about his mistaken engagement and so on. So almost all of them. And Tilney, it explains about his father and what happened there. So I think almost all of them have some kind of an explanation after the proposal.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. There's always a chat. Except for maybe with Mansfield Park. I was going and looking today with all the proposals, and I was failing to, okay, I did eventually find the proposal in Mansfield Park, but man,
You have to
talk
really
about
look.
not interesting.
Well, Jennifer and I are in the same Jane Austen book club, and there was a big discussion when we did Mansfield Park about it needed a proposal scene. It needed one. And I made Jennifer and someone else act it out. I said, you think there should be one? Do it, do it. And I videoed it.
I don't think that was me, Lynn. I don't think so.
It was hilarious. Because it was hard. It was, yeah.
I don't think Edmund would be happy with Fanny.
Let's.
I don't think that would be a happy marriage. I don't think Edmund would be happy with Fanny. He's more interested in somebody like Mary Crawford.
Well, he
I think
was. He was
he's
interested.
not cool enough for Mary.
He was, yeah, of
Was.
course. And I think Fanny would probably be better off marrying Henry.
Oh,
Here. I agree.
It would certainly, she would certainly eventually come out of her shell married to him. And I do believe that she's probably the one woman who could probably change him.
I agree.
They would
I
come,
agree.
they would meet somewhere in the middle and they would be happily ever after. But now,
I don't know.
But the only problem with that is if she marries Henry and Edmund marries Mary, the four of them would never be able to get along. You'd have to separate the two and them live on the other side of, because Mary is such a bad influence on him. It would just be a disaster. Oh my goodness. Oh, and then Mary would have to live with them. She doesn't get married. Go, I'll come live with you, Henry and Fanny.
I like Edmund. I just think he was kind of blind. I think he really had affection for Fanny all along, but was kind of dazzled by Mary. And that after she left him and after a little time went by, he began to realize that she was really more for him, especially his life.
Kirk, do you have your hand up?
No, I was just clapping the last comment.
Oh.
I'm Team Fanny and Edmund with a proposal.
Yeah.
And down with
Send
Mary
you a
Crawford.
videotape.
Well, I think there are certainly times when Edmund and Fanny are talking and the affection that they have for each other is so clear that I almost feel like we don't really need the proposal scene because we already know that Edmund loves Fanny. It's just that he was kind of blinded by Mary's sex appeal, I think.
And they've been friends forever. I mean, this is someone she grew up with. She was so young when she came to live at Mansfield Park, and this was her champion, her quote unquote older brother for a while, and then her best friend. So this isn't like Darcy and Elizabeth meeting at a dance. This is someone she's known from childhood.
No. She needs a proposal.
Oh, and like I said, I can send you the videotape I did. Although Jennifer would never agree to it.
He needs to step up his game. It's a big leap from friends and close related friends and first cousins to being there.
I mean, you kind of need it to move their relationship from being friends and being almost brother and sister to a romantic relationship, because he may have just loved her as a sister previously, and it gets a bit icky if you don't see some sort of transition and you don't see a loving proposal. So I'm with Kirk on this one. And then yes, we all need a proposal.
How about in Mr. Knightley's proposal to Emma, I love the line, dearest, most beloved Emma, for beloved you will always be. And I kind of like that he says, I'm going to love you even if you say no to me. I think that's the most romantic thing, even more romantic than Captain Wentworth's letter. I know those are fighting words.
I was going to
Knightley's proposal as well.
I was just going to say that I really like the way that I think his name is Mark Strong played the part of Mr. Knightley, and he's not quite as much the ideal of the handsome and all that, but his acting was absolutely superb, because Jane Austen's proposal words are a little awkward if you don't handle them right. And I thought in the Emma with Kate Beckinsale, he really handled those words so well, and you believed him and you really liked him. And as much as I like Colin Firth and everybody else that's played those parts, as far as I think that first proposal could have been much more dramatic and feeling, because even though he was insulting her, I think he ardently loved her. He didn't say, I so much ardently love you. No, he was ardent about it, even though he was very insulting at the same time. So I would say for acting, I would give Mark Strong for the whole movie the best kudos for acting.
But the kiss had absolutely no chemistry. I just cringe every time I watch the kiss between Kate Beckinsale and Mark Strong.
I'm a Johnny Lee Miller fan. What can I say? That he's my Mr. Knightley. But it is funny, like in that scene, it is like what Rosemary said, it is kind of awkward, like the wording of, even how he says, if I loved you less, I might be able to talk about it more. He says it kind of awkwardly because it's somewhat of an awkward line. Yeah, and that, I think because they're sort of the start and stop of the, at first he starts talking about how much he envies Frank, and then Emma tells him stop talking because she thinks he's going to tell her that he loves Harriet. It kind of does show how much a proposal is really hard because of all the constraints of decorum and propriety that people, didn't talk about their feelings in those days. And it was an incredible risk to tell someone unless, like they were really big flirts and had flirted with you, but none of our heroines are flirts. So, even Mr.
None of our heroines are flirts. Let me think about that one. I'm thinking. None of our
How about Emma and Henry Croft?
Emma. Yeah, Emma is a flirt. I would say
She's a flirt with the person that she doesn't care about, though.
That's a good flirt.
Well, she's not sure she doesn't care about him initially.
It's a flirt. So, I mean, I think it takes two to flirt. It takes two to flirt. So I think.
Well, with Mr. Elton, of course she's trying to, get him interested in Harriet, but still, Emma's just so delightful. I think she maybe is flirting and she doesn't even know she's doing it. I don't know.
I think one of the most charming parts of Emma is where she's been wrestling with whether or not whether she was in love with Frank. And she's like, well, I'll have to decide. I have a little bit of stomach churning, so maybe I am. Maybe this is love. Not quite what I thought it would be, but how do I know? She thought maybe as his absence continues, I'll see if I continue to have more stronger feelings for him. You get the impression that's the first time she's allowed herself to question whether she's in love with anyone. And I think it's really sweet the way it's portrayed.
And it's sort of similar to how Elizabeth sort of questions herself about Mr. Wickham after he starts getting interested in Miss King, who's just inherited 10,000 pounds. It's like I think because they've never been in real love, they're kind of questioning like, I guess I got off that really kind of easy, and yeah, I'm not really affected. So,
Oh, that's an interesting thought, because then with I'm blanking on Anne having the relationship with Wentworth early on. I'm rereading Persuasion yet again, and she everyone's compared to him. She meets the right guy first, and then has to go through Charles Musgrove, who would have been a reputable husband and whatnot. It wasn't like she ended up with a scandalous guy. And even William Elliot. I'm on the end of it now, and she's already knows she's not going to go with this guy, but she's like, he is charming. He is fun. I'm having a good time in Bath with him, but I'm still waiting for Frederick. But she met the right guy first and then had other infatuation or relationships.
I think there's a big difference between Elton's proposal and Knightley's proposal. Obviously, I think it's pretty clear that Emma realizes that Elton's is more, I don't know what you would say, fictitious, whereas Mr. Knightley's is sincere. and she can see the difference between the two.
And she's not telling him to get back on his side of the carriage.
That's true. That's right.
Marla, did you want to say something?
Well, thank you. Yes, I think that Emma recognizes, Emma does, as we know, seem so clueless throughout much of the book, but I think she recognizes almost immediately with Mr. Elton that, as she later explains to Harriet, he was trying to aggrandize himself. I think she sees him for what he is when he proposes to her, which is a bit of a fortune hunter.
Yeah. And I think the language, like his being able to use like sort of sentimental language in proposing and being so like his language is so smooth. I think Austen always has this sense of like, if you have real feeling, it's actually hard to put it into words, and you're struggling to find the right words. And there's a lot of starts and stops, her famous dashes. So it's like, if they're too glib, then it's not a real proposal, or there's no real feeling there.
Yeah, to that end, I often wonder if when Collins proposed to Charlotte, if he used and replayed the same.
What a thought.
I'm sure she didn't get something really fresh.
No.
Well, he's
This
had
is-
practice.
You might be thinking, this didn't work with Lizzie. What do I change here in the approach?
It was good practice for him.
Very true.
Well, and they do make it sound like Charlotte just wanted him to shut up so she could go in and tell her parents. And it sounded like he just kept talking, and
She's like, yes, I'm saying yes. Just stop now. Yes.
talk to the hand.
He's like, well, I've arranged this little ditty that I know will be so pleasing to a lady's ears. I need to go to it.
Well, now he knows to mention Catherine de Bourgh as the first reason to get married instead of the third reason.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to go back and read Mr. Collins' proposal again. That is so beyond funny.
So here's a question, going back to persuasion. Do you think that Wentworth would have been in as much agony if he hadn't come to Bath and seen that Anne was being pursued by someone else? I mean, he seemed to be in touch with his feelings by the time he decided to go to Bath and find her. But to get there and find that she was being sought out by, or at least going to concerts with someone else, must have increased his agony. And would he have acted as quickly if he didn't feel he was in jeopardy of losing her, I guess?
Doesn't he say that he went deliberately to Bath to find her, and I'm assuming propose to her?
Yes, he did
So,
say that.
Yes.
I think he would have been as quick. He was just a little less sure about the outcome, because
Well, he had to
Mr.
make sure
Elliot.
about Louisa and Benwick before he was going to have to move with Anne. So
But once he got the news of Benwick and Louisa being taken care of, I knew he was the first time the first and even the second time he ran into Anne in Bath, it was a very stiff conversation. It's like he didn't really get on with it right away.
I'm in that part of the book right now, and it is so awkward. I mean, it's they spend most of the novel apart.
Yeah.
There's a girl, I'm reading this with a group, and there's a first-time reader, and she came in and she just said, why is Anne not going for Mr. Elliot? He's this, he's that, he's this. And we could say nothing except just keep on reading. But it looks like Wentworth is never going to show up. I mentioned that in this thing. It just said, when does she start to lose hope and go, it's over? And when does Wentworth, what is he thinking as he goes to Bath? This girl's been waiting for me for 7 years. I'm going to show up and ta-da. Is that what he's thinking?
I don't think that that's what he's thinking. I think he took comfort in learning that she had turned down Charles Musgrove.
Okay.
When he,
Oh, yeah.
So I think that that gives him some hope that maybe she still has feelings for him. But I think when he shows up in Bath, and if she had just been, running around Bath with any person, I don't know that he would have been in agony as much as he is. But the fact that it's Mr. Elliot, I think it brings back all of those same status questions. He wasn't good enough for the family in the first place. Mr. Elliot comes from, they presume from wealth after his marriage, and he's in line for the, what is it called? The baronet or the baron. He's going to become, an titled person. I think it brings up all of those old insecurities for him, which is part of the reason he's so slow to come back and propose again.
Good point. Good point. I agree.
Mhm.
And it didn't help that the moment he sees her, now in the book, what I like, the films don't do it this way, but in the book, she sees him first. So she's already had her recovery period. And then after about 3 minutes, he sees her. So he is, of course, taken, so it's, it gets off on the wrong foot immediately. I mean, there isn't even a pleasure of seeing each other. It's just awkward, continuing to be awkward. You want an umbrella? It's raining. There's not enough people in the carriage. Oh my gosh. Lady Russell's looking at curtains, but is she looking at him? I mean, it's just one awkward thing after another. It never gets calm until that letter. Really, it's the letter that just brings it. It's awkward to that moment. Why? Mystery. Well, I'm reading the book now again, so I'll see. I'm digging deep.
Does anyone have any thoughts about the recent Netflix version of Persuasion?
I loved it, but I always run counter to everyone's opinions. So.
I have no comment because I still have not seen it, so I got nothing. But I did like Emma 2020, and I know that was also a little controversial. So.
I'm looking at the a question about Darcy's second proposal. Has he changed enough to warrant her acceptance of his marriage? And I think you have to look at that in conjunction with Darcy's attitude toward her at Pemberley and her aunt and uncle. Based on that, I think he is spot on with his second proposal.
Well, and you have to remember that she had misunderstood him in the first place and misunderstood his character. So he didn't really have to change as much as she would have thought he would have to change
True.
for him to be acceptable to her.
But Jane Austen does make clear prior to his reflection after Lizzie turns him down that he is indeed arrogant, conceited, and has a selfish disdain for the feelings of others. I mean, there's several sentences and paragraphs where the narrative really paints that picture of who he is, and it's his passion for Lizzie Bennet that I would argue forces him to reflect on who he is and how he's treated people in the past. And he's probably, I believe that he would admit that, yeah, he was arrogant, conceited, and changed.
Right. See, who is it that is it Jane that says that he has a right to be proud? Because
I think it's Charlotte Lucas actually says that, if I remember
I think
correctly.
Charlotte too. I think Charlotte.
In that society, he had everything going for him, and they were expected to behave quite proudly, and arrogantly. That wasn't considered a character flaw necessarily, but he learned that it was a character flaw.
One of the passages that I think illustrates that to me was when Lizzie and Fitzwilliam are walking together just before they dive into the fact that Bingley's been saved from an imprudent marriage by Darcy. Fitzwilliam mentions that he's there visiting Lady Catherine for as long as Darcy wishes, because it's Darcy's decision to make as to when they come and when they go. And that kind of reinforces the fact that Darcy hasn't really taken into account, the feelings and needs of even someone he's good friends with, like Fitzwilliam. And Fitzwilliam seems to recognize that this comes with the territory.
Yeah, it's all about status and who's in charge. And I think, I don't think Colonel Fitzwilliam is resentful of it. It's just a fact that Darcy is the leader between the two of them.
Based on wealth,
Mhm.
not as much as
He's a
lineage.
head of family, so. Where he says goes. So.
Yeah, I think for all of the men, there has to be like some realization that they have power that maybe women don't, and that they have to really kind of understand women coming from a place of powerlessness, which I think was part of Wentworth's problem with, women's only power in that society kind of was that they could say no to a proposal. They couldn't propose. So they only had the power, as Henry Tilney says, the power of refusal. And I think like Austen wants to show that the men are able to like recognize that a woman's position is different from a man's position, and in order for them to be good mates, because in the society, once you married a man, the man had all the power.
But I think Austen is also trying to show us that it was often extremely dangerous for the woman to exercise that one power she had and say no. I mean, it's Mr. Collins who points out to Lizzie that as attractive as you are, it's very conceivable that you will not get another marriage proposal. And Charlotte, obviously, isn't going to risk saying no to Mr. Collins because she needs the security of being married. And in Emma explains to Harriet that she doesn't need to say yes to a man because she has the security of running her father's house and of his wealth. But there were very few women who had that kind of security. So the one power that women have, the ability to say no, is also something to be used extremely carefully, I think.
Agree.
We haven't talked too much about Northanger Abbey. Any thoughts about kind of the lack of a proposal scene there?
Now, Northanger Abbey is my favorite Austen novel. And one of the things I like about it is that you get Catherine and Henry from the get-go, their whole relationship, unlike the other books where the couples are rarely together, they're just hodgepodge and there's usually angst. To me, it's a young adult novel. It's a coming of age novel. It's I know it's a Gothic parody and stuff, but I love their relationship from the get-go. You see how you act at a dance. And I wasn't until I read this book that I realized the dances lasted a half an hour. I didn't realize that when I first read it. There's so much you learn about society. And the way they treat each other is so fun. He's, a tease, and he knows books, and he's got a castle. He's a great guy. I love their relationship.
Yeah, there's two dances.
Delightful.
There's two dances from what I understand. From what I'm reading in these books, is there's two dances in that half-hour set.
Okay. And because I was always wondering, how are they can only talk when they're dancing. They can't go off, on the balcony and talk to each other. So of course a dance, if it lasted like when I was growing up in the 60s, 3 minutes and we're doing twist and shout. How much talking is going to be happening? I love how the protocol and the way you had to do courtship in that time. It's so it's really fascinating.
I thought it was interesting in Pride and Prejudice that Sir William Lucas steps in during the dance between Darcy and Elizabeth and talks to them. Because they're at a moment in the dance where, you know, they're not moving. So
Exactly, because you weren't dancing that whole half hour.
right.
Well,
You
once you
yeah.
get to the end, then you're out for a little bit until
Yeah.
it's really interesting. I've gotten to do some of that style dancing at the AGMs, and you know, you move your either ones or your twos, and you're moving this direction, and when you get to the end, you're out for a little bit till everybody does a figure, and then you come back in as the other,
Right.
going the opposite direction. So that's when Sir William Lucas stops to talk to them, I think, is when they are out and they're standing
Right.
without anything to do at the moment.
Yeah, when you know that, when you later on, I think I read an annotated version of Northanger Abbey and learned so much about the dancing. And like you said, you know, it isn't like you're interrupting someone. It seems like you would be, but it's not
Yeah.
that way at all.
Yeah. That's the most fun thing that I've done at an AGM is go to the dance class and then dance at the ball. So I'd urge anyone to try that.
We're all fond of Regency dancing. Right, Jennifer?
Yes. We could do the black nag.
We can do the black nag.
So I think that a lot of modern readers think of Jane Austen as a romance writer, which I think is really narrow. But based on the way that she does proposals, do you think that we could back that up, that yes, she is a romance writer, or say no, she's not, based on the way she does proposals? What do people think?
Well, that's part of her writing, certainly is romance, but it's also frequently a comedy and a drama. And I've read, I took that class there at Southampton, their online class. And one of the professors said that she was the instigator of what we know today as the rom-com, the romance comedies.
Rom-com, yeah.
Yes, the rom-com. But I mean, there's drama, you know, in her novels. So I wouldn't say strictly romance, but
I would say she was the contemporary fiction writer of her day. We talk a lot about contemporary fiction now, and you know, that's the year we live in. She was writing about her day. And I actually don't like it when people refer to her as a romance writer. Sometimes I think you've never read her. If you're referring to her as that, you've never read the novels. And I don't know, it's just, I think she was a contemporary writer of that time.
I think she
Yeah.
was trying to show like a woman's developing a sense of self in the way that, you know, male characters got to have a sense of self develop over the course of a novel. And she had to kind of fit it into the marriage plot in order to fit sort of the commercial criteria of the time that it would be sold. But I think we don't see much of the proposal because that for her is really not the important thing. The important thing is how the characters change and develop.
I think there's
Yes.
also an aspect of the fact that she was living in a time where it was transitioning from a woman being almost completely beholden to whoever asked, and you know, they didn't really rely on getting second offers, to the experience of her, was it her aunt or whoever was living in India, or got married and went away, where women were starting to have a little bit more opportunity to be out and about in the world with their husbands, and to have a little bit more autonomy, just, you know, a small baby step. but the fact that maybe you could marry for love was just starting to be on people's minds. And I think that's, she blended that into her stories in a way that probably made a lot of young girls or even young boys who were reading this say, maybe I should think about that as one of the other factors I choose a mate. I think before that they didn't entertain that love relationship as much. At least that's my.
That's a good thought. That's a good thought, because you're trying to think of some other contemporary novels, like what Jane read herself, and Evelina, and different the different novels of that time. I think what you said was really fantastic. Really well said.
Thank you.
I guess I always thought that the fact that she didn't show the proposals so often, and that she left things kind of vague, was to do with her not writing scenes that she didn't have any knowledge or experience with. And I know she received one marriage proposal, but I can't imagine that that was too romantic from Harris Bigwither. But I thought she maybe just left all those things kind of vague because of her lack of experience personally. And where is it? Oh, it's in Mansfield Park, when she says, just flipped to it. I purposely abstained from dates on this occasion that everyone may be at liberty to fix their own, aware that, anyway, just she leaves it blank for us to fill in our own blanks, so it's like she knows she's doing that, and she's doing it on purpose, at least in this case. I only entreat everybody to believe that exactly at the time when it was quite natural that it should be so, and not a week earlier, Edmund did cease to care about Mary Crawford and became as anxious to marry Fanny as Fanny herself could desire. So.
Well, you might be bordering into a Harlequin novel if you start to write it out, and maybe left to the imagination is better. For those of you that read the Anne of Green Gables books, Gil never proposed to Anne.
No.
You turn the page and where is it? That's why you need the movies, I guess.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of blanks in Austen to fill in, and that's.
How about we haven't talked too much about like Marianne and Colonel Brandon not really having any kind of resolution. Do people feel like that is something that was really left out?
Well, that's one of those nice blanks that I took the liberty of filling in, because I write novels, and so in Colonel Brandon, in his own words, I give you the proposal scene that you must have.
And that looks suspiciously like Alan Rickman. Is that on the cover?
Purely coincidental.
Okay.
Marquis has been right again.
So that's, what I'm talking about, blanks. If you want to order up a proposal scene, maybe I can write you one.
Bristling in his tweed suit, and she's unsure what is meant by it.
I do get a sense in Jane Austen's novels that she is presenting heroines as having some independence of thought. Yes, you could argue that they're limited on, who they're going to marry, when they're going to marry, but in the end, it's their decision. So I think that's a key theme to her novels, is that women can be independent, that they do have some control over their lives.
Also, it's fun to have a girl be the heroine of a novel. Again, you're writing in the late, well, some of her books were late 1700s, but the turn of the century, that century, and you're a reader in that time. And just think of living in that time and reading Jane Austen in that time. It's just very fun to think about. And as Jane herself was such a huge reader. I mean, she had access to her dad's library and probably read every book in there.
Mhm. As well as her brother's library at Godmersham in Chawton. But Jane did a lot of traveling. So I would say that she saw a lot of marriages. She traveled to most of her brothers when they were married and when their wives were about to give birth. Either Jane or Cassandra would travel to their brother's home and be with their wives while they're giving birth and stuff. So I'd say she has some experience that certainly is not limited to Chawton and Bath. She's seen things, she's seen different people, different characters. We talk about, her not specifically narrating the proposals, but I would think that she's probably had many conversations with her brother's wives who's married. So she probably had some knowledge of proposals.
I think of the book Lady Susan, and she wrote that when she was like 19. And that book is just amazing. I mean, I know she redid it a little bit. It was never meant for publication. I do know that too, but still, that was quite a character with an anti-hero or whatever.
The heroine. Yeah.
Anti-heroine. Yeah. Very, very fun book. In my opinion, I love it.
I was reading something that said that she might have read, so I can't say the French version, but Dangerous Liaisons, the French book, that and that, that might have been part of her inspiration. And also connecting, like Lady Susan is almost like a kind of like a rake character, like Lovelace in the Clarissa by Richardson. But
I wonder if she inspired the Mary Crawford character. Mary Crawford is nearly as bad in Mansfield Park, but she's got that same sort of heartless attitude. I'm not a fan. Maybe everybody else is a big fan of Mary Crawford. I'm not a fan. So
that's a good thought, because she was, she's got her juvenilia, and then this comes so quickly after her juvenilia. Lady Susan does. She's really trying out a lot of things, and that's where I see Lady Susan as just almost something she wrote on her own for fun, maybe for family. I know she read her things out loud to her family, and they would offer suggestions. I think everyone was laughing a lot when she was reading that out loud.
Lady Susan's interesting because it's the women who are really powerful. So Lady Susan and then her sister-in-law, Catherine Vernon, are the two that actually seem to like have a clue of what's going on. And it seems like the men have no clue what's going on. So, but we don't get the proposal scene in that one either. So
maybe all the proposal scenes were in her juvenilia. and she went, you know what? I'm not doing that again.
Yeah. No, I could see Lady Susan proposing marriage to somebody. I could see that. She's that.
Does she kind of do that with Manbury? She breaks up the marriage.
Yeah. But I don't think she actually says, marry me. I don't think.
She might be assuming that. Yeah.
Well, it's all in
Or
letters, so it'd have to be in a letter. Proposal.
Yeah. That makes it awkward.
any other thoughts about like in Mansfield Park when Henry's proposing. I think the way that it's portrayed by Austen is really interesting because Fanny's so confused about what's going on, and like there's sort of that confusion in the way that the scene is written, where eventually it dawns on Fanny that he really is allegedly offering his hand, but she doesn't think that he's really serious. I know there's some people that wanted her to marry Henry.
Not me. I think that when I think that she had a strong moral backbone, and also I think she was already in love with Edmund, and she was going to stick with that. And also she saw through Henry, I think, and I think she just had that. I think she's in a way almost, well, unlike a lot of others, she's just a very moral person and just does not like him. So
It's been a while since I read Mansfield Park, but doesn't she have a momentary thought about it?
She does. She does.
That's what I thought. Yeah. Yeah,
But it's in Portsmouth. It's towards the end of the book.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
When he comes to her and visits her with the family, which is such a great scene. I love that scene. And
Yes.
she's starting to falter then. But you know, she's holding out for Edmund. If she had heard that Edmund and Mary had gotten engaged, I think she might have said yes to Henry.
But why would she think Edmund would ever propose?
Oh, I don't know if that he would think she'd ever. It's kind of like Anne and Wentworth. This is the person I love, and until they're unattached, I'm holding out for them. That's kind of how I feel with those two gals. I think they would have stayed single rather than marry someone that wasn't the one they truly loved.
Although I don't think Henry really knew the real Fanny. You know, like he had this fantasy that she was an angel, and she's not an angel. She's, you know, a human being who's judgmental and jealous and got all these emotions. She's, you know, I think that Fanny's a real person in how Austen portrays her, because she does have all of these emotions that aren't pretty. But he just sees her as like this, you know, kind of not realistic person.
Well, and he wants her. He knows that if she will better him. And what I love about Henry and both Mary, and I love about Austen, is she takes all her characters, whether they're heroes or villains or scoundrels or whatever, they've all got strengths and weaknesses. That's what I especially love about Jane Austen, is there's no black and white characters. There's always some, but is there something good about John Thorpe?
Well, what about Wickham? Can you find anything good about Wickham?
Yeah, his personality. He's got a great personality.
Yeah, I was going to say the charm, you know, if that's all that someone has going for them, the charm, the caring, talking, this you know, good dance partner. But I was trying to think of John Thorpe. Is there anything redeemable about John Thorpe?
I can't think of anything good about John. Is he nice to his sisters? Maybe, maybe.
I that part where he calls his mom a witch. I mean, this guy
Yeah,
is
I don't think he's nice to his sisters. Yeah, I think we can't redeem John Thorpe.
Or Isabella.
Isabella. Oh, I love Isabella. She's such a great scoundrel. Is that a good word?
Lynn, didn't you say you were in a book group that they were reading, and the person thought that Isabella was a nice friend and was super happy?
Yes, I was the book club. It's so good how Austen, when you read the stories over and over, they're so familiar. But the first time readers, they were just like, oh my gosh, you know, Catherine's found such a wonderful friend in Isabella. And I'm thinking, is Jane Austen writing that so well that as a first time reader, you're not seeing red flags, you know, early on in the story, not when she becomes creepy in the middle and whatever, but at the very beginning, it's like she's Catherine's BFF.
She's pretentious, And so is Mr. Wickham. They're similar in character.
Yeah, I love those scoundrels. I just love those scoundrels. They're so well written. And they have to be that charming because they have to be, because it wouldn't work. If Marianne wasn't in love with Willoughby, it wouldn't work. Catherine's not in love with John Thorpe. As naive as she is.
I remember when I read Northanger Abbey the first time, I even highlighted Isabella Thorpe's line on friendship, that she doesn't love people by halves. And then I felt so stupid when I read her letter after that. Oh my God, she's such a pretentious girl. I can't believe I highlighted that line. So I cannot unhighlight my copy anymore. But I felt so ashamed in liking Isabella the first time. So I really thought she was like something like a Jane to Elizabeth or something. And then to my horror, she was actually the opposite of that.
Yeah.
But Austen does such a great job of giving the baddies the great lines. I mean, she gives Mary Crawford the reading. Mary Crawford. Yeah, Caroline Bingley the reading line. And
Yes.
It makes the money in England. But it's from Caroline Bingley, who's probably never read a book from cover to cover in her life.
Someone said that Austen must be laughing in her grave when she sees T-shirts of the reading lines and the friendship lines from the evil characters.
I always think, like, you know, when someone's quoting something from Austen, I always think, yeah, you don't really know who said that line, because if you knew who said it, you wouldn't be having it on your T-shirt.
Well, one of the most popular lines that you see on T-shirts is "obstinate, headstrong girl," and that was a line from what many would consider a not very nice person.
I also think there are lines that you can only find romantic if you're an Austen fan. Like that line that Darcy says when he talks about when he started falling in love with Elizabeth. I was in the middle before I knew I had begun. I put that on display in my room, and people would not get it because they couldn't understand the context. I mean, you can't put it on a shirt, but like I remember that scene so fondly, and I feel that it's very romantic, even if just taken out of context, it isn't so. And I think that's how you feel that Austen's characters are so well written, and the lines, though they may be brief, they actually put a lot of punch into it, as if you've read the entire novel and if you've read the context in which they've come from.
That's a good point. I agree. Yeah, it's their characters. I mean, we mostly in our book club, we talk characters. We don't talk plot so much when we're discussing a book. And here it's the same thing. We don't talk about plot as much as we're talking about characters, and we can immediately say Mary Crawford, and we're all on the same page. We know, it's very fun.
Next Zoom meeting, perhaps. Plots.
Oh,
Plots. Next Zoom meeting.
Okay. That's actually it's a good question, because it's fun when you've read all the novels to start to compare them to each other, which is very, very fun.
I think Pride and Prejudice has to have the most complex and well thought out plotting of like all these coincidences that end up making the ending actually happen.
But I think it also has a little bit more of the ebb and flow of real life. Like, for example, after they've met Bingley and Darcy and the Bennets are having their family dinner, and Mr. Bennet starts to say, "Oh, I've had a letter." And Mrs. Bennet jumps to the conclusion it's from their new acquaintances, but it's yet from still another person, a new character. And you're already maybe a quarter of the way into the story. And I think that's the way real life happens. Other things happen while you're waiting for that main plot to advance, and here comes some incoming Mr. Collins.
When we were talking about characters, I think that's one of Jane Austen's extreme strengths is her characters. And you, even in these days, you meet somebody just like them, like Mrs. Bennet, the person that's pushy for her daughters. or even in Emma, the chatty lady that you wish would shut up, but you want to be polite. And just everybody's character is just so well done, and she must really have observed people, but a lot of them are true to people to today.
Yeah, like Anne Elliot's father, always looking for a mirror to check if his hair is in right.
Yeah, her novels are a study in human behavior, the human condition.
One other thing I was going to bring up when we were talking about the explanations after the proposals, a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them have the financial arrangements, how Edward is going to make it, and how with Darcy, there's no problem. But, with some of the others, how they're going to make it on their preacher's salary or whatever. It's just really interesting because there's a lot of maybe paragraph upon paragraph about financial problems.
And I think that's another thing about it being a contemporary novel. This would have been way part of a proposal of I love you and let's talk finances.
How can this work? Yes.
Yeah. And I love when Colonel Brandon helps out Edward. Edward, am I getting the name right? Yeah, Edward in Sense and Sensibility. That at the end when he gets the parts and all that. That was just so sweet.
I also think it's very telling that in Emma, when Mrs. Elton is introduced to the people of Highbury, she goes into the details of her financial discussions with Mr. I told him I could get by with one instead of two carriages, but I couldn't give up my music. What other woman would discuss the details of her financial arrangements of their new husband with strangers, I'm sure there are some, no doubt, who did, but again, Austen's good at capturing the nuances of character.
And since you mentioned Mrs. Elton, Michelle has left out the most important proposal of all. Mrs. Elton's proposal to take over Mr. Knightley's party. and his refusal. So tactful. I could not begin to imagine refusing a Mrs. Elton with an egg of his charm. Until Mrs. Knightley is in being, I shall manage things myself. Now, that's probably from Emma 09 rather than the book, but.
That was a great scene.
What time is it in New Zealand?
It's just before 1 p.m. on Monday.
Oh.
So yeah, I was eating lunch. That's why my camera was off.
Any other thoughts?
I like Emma because she's wealthy. That's a really interesting introduction to Jane Austen, because that's the one gal, as Emma says, that she not interested in marrying because she's got all the money she needs. So why should she concern herself with marrying? And I thought that really added a unique aspect to the plot of Emma.
Do you think it would have been different if her mother was still alive? Would her mother have been pushing her to marry, do you think?
Well, I would say no, because I don't know. I would say no, that she would not, because she's, the one daughter who's, I never could the living situation between Emma and Emma's sister, right? So I don't know if the mother was alive, how that would affect things, but she's not alive. So I've often wondered, well, where does Emma and Mr. Knightley live?
They live with Emma's father. They live at
When she dies, that house goes to Emma's sister.
You mean
Be-
after the father after the
Right.
father dies?
Yeah, after the father dies, that house, the Woodhouse house, goes to Emma's sister because Knightley's house goes to Emma's sister's eldest son. Am I correct or wrong on that?
Well, it would go to Knightley, and then if Emma and Knightley have kids, it would go to their kids. It only goes to John Knightley's son if Mr. Knightley doesn't have children.
Ah, okay.
And spoiler alert, Jane Austen tells us that, or at least family lore tells us that Mr. Woodhouse only lasted 2 years.
I don't remember that.
That wasn't in the book.
Yeah, I said family lore.
Family lore. Oh, okay.
Family lore.
I think it was in one of the biographies of,
Yeah.
or memoirs of Jane.
I agree with what you were just saying about Emma, having that long dissertation to Harriet about how she doesn't have to marry and how that, makes it a more interesting kind of a storyline. But I also think Emma is so unrealistic when she's talking to Harriet about that, because she poses marriage as being exclusively for the financial, betterment for the woman, with sort of no understanding about the need for companionship and love and, romantic love or physical.
Well, she does say, though, that if she were to fall in love, it would be a different matter, but she's never been in love and she doesn't think she's the kind of person to fall in love. So she is at least acknowledging that love is one reason to get married.
I'll have to go back and reread that.
And then it's interesting that she's matchmaking for everyone else.
Yeah.
Of course, that's the irony.
Yeah. Well, I'm writing a Mr. Knightley book now, so anything you want me to put in, let me know, if you want to improve on the proposal scene or find something not plausible that I can tweak a little bit.
Is it during the time of Emma or is it afterwards?
No, it's not a sequel. It's going to be, a lot of it's going to be prequel type material. His early life, his early adult life, and then his during the term of the novel itself, his with Emma.
Has he been in love with anyone else before?
Yes, he has. That's the part I'm trying to work on right now. And so
It's not Jane Fairfax. Not Jane Fairfax.
no,
Yeah.
not Jane Fairfax.
Don't make the mistake of several adaptations of leaving Mr. John Knightley out.
What's that?
Keep John Knightley in.
Oh,
More
yes.
John Knightley, please.
Oh, yeah. I don't change any of what canon says. I don't change anything. I only add on and fill in blanks and things like that. So
Well,
John,
then we could get the whole John and Isabel, how they got together, and you
Yeah.
could write that proposal.
there you go. We're missing that one too, aren't we? Yeah, I've written a scene between, John Knightley and George Knightley when John tells George that he's going to marry Isabella, when
Okay.
George
all right.
thinks he's probably going to marry Isabella, and John says, no, I don't think so.
No.
Whoa.
Oh. Uh-oh.
But it's
So
okay
we're
because, well, George wasn't in love with Isabella anyway. It was just expected that he would marry her, but I think.
older
Anyway.
brother. Yeah. Okay.
Is John older than Mr. Knightley? I thought Mr. Knightley was the older of the brothers.
Yes, he is. But
Yeah,
you would
okay.
think the eldest of one family would marry the eldest daughter, eldest
Right.
son of one prominent
And the
family would be
children,
likely to marry the eldest daughter of the other prominent family.
Okay.
Even though there's a big age difference. Of course, it's even bigger with Emma. But,
Don't even start me on that.
oh, it's really confusing, and I'm trying to keep track of timelines and keep track of who's what age everybody is at this point in the book, and who's older than who by how much, and
Would
crazy.
it have been less disturbing to Austen's readers, that age difference, than I find it? And then I'm thinking a lot of other.
Yes, it would have.
Yeah.
It would have. And I know some good couples that have that big of an age difference now. And it just seems weird when somebody's 21, and it's different when you're 35, when the younger's 35 and the other one's 45. It doesn't seem quite so bad. But it's just because Emma's young. And then there's that whole thing, I held you when you were a baby, and it just.
Yeah, that's not in the book, but I mean, obviously.
Is that just in the movie? Oh, good.
Yeah.
Phew.
But
Phew.
I mean, he obviously would have known Emma when she was a baby.
Yeah.
So it is weird to, well, it's just kind of the same kind of a thing. And that's part of the situation there too, where they were friends first. And then how do you make that transition? Of course, at least they're not first cousins.
Right. Yeah. See, and there's some things like the cousin thing, marrying cousins, we don't do that. So it's trying to get past what for us, for 21st century American men and women, has an ick factor that wouldn't have an ick factor then. And so trying to remember, okay, this isn't an ick factor then. So you need to get factor.
I mean, Knightley is what, 16 years older than she is. So he might be technically old enough to be her father, but he's not actually old enough to be her father. Right. And lots of women in that period did marry men who were old enough to be their fathers or their grandfathers. So it was not a problem back then, and where it is for us now.
Unless you're a Hollywood star.
Yeah, well, and then of course there's always the same double standard where it's okay for the older men to marry a younger woman, but not the other way around.
Yeah.
There's a successful one. Juliet Mills, the actress, Juliet, not Haley Mills, but Haley Mills' sister, Juliet, married that guy that was in Grease 2. Not Travolta, Grease number 2. And I think he's about 16, 18 years younger than she is. And they've been married. They met early on, and I don't know what, but they've been married. She's in her 80s now. So he's got to be, she might be in her 70s. But anyway, successful marriage. They're still around. They're still married.
And Goldie Hawn is married to Kurt Russell, who is, I think, younger than her by some measure as well.
Yeah, about 10 years, I think.
Yeah. Well, when Susan ends up with the dopey guy, I can't remember. Is he closer to Frederica's age?
Reginald.
Anybody remember?
Reginald Corsi. Martin. I think he's like 10 years younger than her.
Okay, 10. All right. Okay.
What?
So somewhere between Lady Susan and Frederica's age. He's in between those two. Okay. Yeah. All right.
What time is it in the PI? What time is it in the PI? The Philippines.
Oh, sorry. Right now it's 8 o'clock in the morning.
Oh.
We're spanning the globe.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Austen, Jane Austen World Tour.
I can't really talk to a lot about Austen around here, so I found this and was really, I consider myself really fortunate.
Well, you've got a lot of work to do. You've got a lot of people to convert then, don't you?
We love having people come from all over. It just makes the discussion so great. So, all right. Well, as I said, we are recording this, so we'll send out something.
Hi.
Yeah.
Hi, baby. Hi.
Oh, sorry. So we'll send a link out to everybody who registered once we get it. It'll probably take a couple of days to put it onto YouTube if anybody wants to watch it again. But thanks everyone for participating, and we really appreciate y'all coming and contributing. It was a quite lively discussion and really appreciate it.
Oh, I wanted to ask, how was the in-person discussion?
I wasn't at that. Chuck, you were at it, right?
Yeah, it was great. Yeah, it was great. It took the whole 2 hours. A lot of the topics similar to what we discussed today, and expanded even more so with a little bit of more time there. So yeah, it was fun.
How many people came?
I want to say 14 of us were there, something like that. 12 or 14, I believe, was there.
And is this a normal thing that you guys do? I know that Michelle and I, we've contacted over the flat Jane Austen and, all, on Facebook, et cetera. But as far as doing this, are you doing it again?
I know when down in Pullman, when Pamela Aiden was the guest speaker, I think, Michelle, we had almost 30 for that, 26.
Yeah.
26 or so.
So this was the first time we've done it where we had a discussion in person and then a couple of weeks later, a discussion on Zoom. I like doing the Zoom discussions just because we do have a very spread out region, and there's a lot of people that, can't go to Spokane because, like that's 90 minutes from where I live. So, yeah, we're going to try to do it where we'll have probably some in person and still continue to have some on Zoom.
So this was kind of your maiden voyage, excuse me, in doing both.
In doing both.
And you did it 2 weeks apart?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you for doing the Zoom. It's
Yes, thank
awesome
you.
to be able to, just have this Jane Austen community around the world. It's great.
Yeah, it's really, we love having people from all over. Since we're a smaller region, our meetings are nice and big when we have, people from all over come. So we appreciate it.
And it's always great topics.
Thank you.
Well, the proposal topic is very fun. We'll have to go with plots next time, right? But the questions were fabulous. The questions
Good.
were wonderful.
Thank you.
I
Well-
also noticed the good proposals were often outdoors, and the unsuccessful ones tend to be in rooms in characters.
Yeah.
Great thought.
Like even Tilney makes a point of asking Catherine's mom if he can go out and see the Allens, but he really just proposed to Catherine outside.
Yeah. Huh.
Is that a privacy thing, do you think?
Probably.
Yeah.
And it makes for a good movie since the scenes of the proposal tend to be outdoors.
Yeah.
I
Be
true.
alone in a room together.
Well, that was Darcy and Elizabeth's first proposal was, in the house there.
Yeah.
The first one.
Yeah, but it was accident. Well, no, yeah.
Okay, well, thanks everyone for coming, and we'll keep you all posted about the link and for the video if anybody wants to watch it, and hope everyone has a good rest of the day, whether you're on Sunday time or Monday time. But thanks for coming, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you, Michelle.
Thank
Bye-bye,
you.
all.